Mike. Toronto. VK on the beat. Check. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm in Toronto like we wanna get the city love. My city love me back for my city love.
Welcome to episode 1313. No, episode 1513. Jeff Chalmers has me so fucking nervous over here. Toronto mic'd. He's a real broadcaster, everybody. Proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. The Toronto Maple Leafs baseball team, the best baseball in the city outside the Dome. Join me July 7th at Christie Pitts. That's this coming Sunday. I'm recording live with Mike Richards and others. RecycleMyElectronics.ca. Committing to our planet's future means properly recycling our electronics of the past. And Ridley Funeral Home, pillars of the community since 1921. Today, making his Toronto Mic debut is Jeff Chalmers. Welcome, Jeff.
Hey, thanks to see you, or nice to see you. Thanks for having me. This is amazing.
Well, listen, I've never butchered the opening like that before, but I'm like, this guy's a real radio broadcaster. I don't want to fuck it up, but of course, once I said that in my head, I fucked it up. But what a pleasure to meet you, man.
Nice to meet you as well. Can we just take a minute before we go anywhere with the discussion and shout you out? I wanted to.
Okay, well, let's take your time.
Okay, no, seriously. I mean, what an interesting niche you've carved out for yourself in a very non-traditional way. I mean, you're bringing back the long-form interview. It's like Peter Zosky on Morningside, right?
Thank you.
These long, drawn-out in a world of, cute little snippets and sound bites. There's someone who's investing in people and taking the time to have decent and interesting conversations. I think it's really admirable. And you've really done this really unique sort of thing on the internet and taken advantage of the situation. So congrats to you. And 1513.
1513.
That's my favorite number. I mean, it's just unbelievable. The coincidence.
You can get a tattoo that says 1513 on it.
Okay.
I got to say, Jeff, that you're highly desired. I know you're going to say, well, Mike, what took you so long? Well, I kind of was like, I need Jeff Chalmers on. You're still on the radio in this market. I used to hear you all the time on Q107. We're going to walk through your career. But your name was dropped by none other than John Gallagher a few weeks ago on Toronto Mic. He dropped your name. And I'm like, and I reached out on, I think, LinkedIn. I reached out that day when John Gallagher said the word, Jeff Chalmers. I said, I got to get Jeff on Toronto Mic. And here we are.
Well, thank you. Yeah, John's great. John and I worked together beginning in 87 at Q. We can talk about the timeline. But John is, as we know, as you know from your episode, down east and still full of beans.
Still full of beans. And I pulled a clip from the episode because he says something that blew my mind. And he said you would corroborate it. And then I mentioned this in passing to Humble and Fred because I produce a podcast for Humble and Fred.
Right.
And they basically called bullshit on it. So they said, we've never heard of anything like this. And they called bullshit on it. So at some point when we get to your, first tour of duty at Q, or I don't know if it's we're going to walk through it. When we get there, when it's appropriate, I'm going to play John Gallagher's clip. And you're going to say, did John Gallagher embellish this story? Did he make it up? Or did that happen and Humble and Fred are wrong? I can't wait for that moment in this podcast.
Okay. We'll get there. I know where it's going.
Okay, you know where it's going. You did your homework.
Yeah.
Okay.
I heard the episode.
Okay,
yes.
so don't, we're going to just tease it. This is
for sure.
Like a real radio show. We're going to tease things. Okay. Your shirt. I love that you're wearing that shirt. So Chalk Circle was the first band I ever saw live. I saw them at the Ontario Place Forum when I was 10 years old. And I had Chris Tate from Chalk Circle on Toronto Mic. He's an FOTM. Now you're an FOTM. But one last interesting thing when I saw the Chalk Circle shirt is that tomorrow on Toronto Mic, my guest is some guy named Midge Year. And Midge is coming to Toronto to play the Elma Combo, and he's going to be playing with Chris Tate from Chalk Circle. That's happening.
Wow, that's a pretty big deal.
I know.
Mid-year,
so why did you pick? Yeah, say it again. I've been mid-year. That's right, mid-year. Why did you choose that shirt?
I'm a huge fan of this band. And I saw them recently at the Horseshoe back in the fall. They were playing. It was like a one-off. They don't do a lot of shows live anymore.
Right.
And I've always been a fan of this band. And when we were playing them, when the Mending Wall came out, we were playing that album at Q107. And
is that with April Fool on it?
I believe so. No, April Fool. I think was a subsequent album. I forget now.
Okay.
The Great Lake EP. Is that it? I can't recall. So. But Mending Wall 86, 87. We played that on Q. I was a huge fan. I bought the cassette, and I'm into boating, and I had my first sailboat off Bluffers Park, and there's a video my brother took on a video camera that was about this big, and there's a shot of the boat going by, and we can hear the Chalk Circle album playing below. There it is, and today I'm a huge fan.
Wow.
And so they were playing the Horseshoe, and I thought, I'm going to go by myself.
Right.
I love going to shows by myself. You can come and go as you please.
Yep.
I took my GoPro.
So are you taking any video of this? Like, I don't think any guest has ever. I think that's kind of cool. Your perspective or whatever, like a different angle.
Yeah.
So do whatever you like.
I want to capture all this.
But you're gonna edit out the mistake I made off the top in the intro.
Yeah, no,
you'll clean that up.
Yeah, for sure. But anyway, so they had a merch table. I thought, I'm going to support the band. I love black. I love Chalk Circle. I love the logo.
Dress in black, you're a heart attack.
Chris Tate seems like a pretty cool guy.
Yep.
And so this is all of what we're doing, man. Out of Newcastle, Ontario, Chalk Circle.
100%. And I'm surprised already off the top because my memories of Q107 back in those days is that they weren't playing a lot of the new wave stuff. Am I out to lunch on that? Like, to me, Chalk Circle's got the synthesizer, kind of a little bit of a new wave sound that would be a CFNY band and not a Q107 band. Am I out to lunch here, Jeff?
Q really did a lot of different format changes over the years. There was a time when I think we were playing Madonna. I mean, you look at the early 80s charts and it was Thomas Dolby, Men at Work. There were a lot of that's sort of a poppy rock band, if you will, I guess, is that band. But there were a lot of bands that weren't one would consider, traditional rock bands. And I think Q just sort of morphed with the times. We were playing Human League. Don't You Want Me? I mean, you can imagine.
See, I'm shocked because I would think, again, I'm a little bit young to kind of be comparing it in real time, but just historically talking to people that if a band like Human League was sort of a CFNY band, the vibe I got is that Q wouldn't touch them. Like they'll go play Aerosmith instead or something.
Yeah. No, I mean, Q was playing Blue Peter, another band you might associate with CFNY.
Sure, Chris Wardman's an FOTM. Absolutely.
Yeah, big fan of Chris Wardman.
Yeah. Who produced the Chalk Circle record?
It's all coming full circle.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Chalk Circle.
1513.
Full Chalk Circle.
It's incredible. But I mean, there's a lot of Q had a huge universe back in the early 80s when I began there. The universe being
we got to get into it now. We got to walk through it because you were there and I'm going to learn so much in this episode. But I got a note from FOTM Gene Velitis who says, can he play Freebird? Long-time listener, first-time caller. So what are your memories, just off the top since he wrote in, what are your memories of Gene Velitis?
Gene's great. What a talent. What a great, in radio, in Gene's a news guy. And when the Q Morning Zoo started, at least when Scruff began with Q107 in 80, Gene was the co-host. He was doing news at the top and bottom of the hour, I guess it was. And Gene is really, really good at improv. And that's a key a quality trait one has to have in this business is how do you bounce off the host? So whether it was Jake or Scruff or Jesse Dylan, Gene was always there. He knew how to play off the other person, and it's so vital in broadcasting. He was really good at it.
Jeff, if I haven't said it yet, I'm so glad you're here because I want to talk about these Q Morning Zoo shows, and I want to talk about Brother Jake, who's also an FOTM, and the reason John Gallagher is even in our lives here in Toronto, coming from Halifax there, and Jesse and Gene, they've been on the show. Gene, I got to shout him out because he came to a TMLX event at Palma's Kitchen, and I got a lasagna in my freezer for you, Jeff. Do you like lasagna?
I love lasagna.
The best lasagna. Ask Peter Gross, okay? Do you know Peter Gross?
I know Peter Gross, and I wrote to Peter Gross very quickly recently because he was in this episode of What was it was a local Toronto produced show.
Was it like a lawnmower? The neighbors stole his lawnmower and then he murdered him or something? Anything like that? Okay,
no.
he auditioned for that role on this program.
There was I interviewed or I worked with Peter at Rogers back in 06, 07, but I'd seen Peter on a recent episode through YouTube of a show produced in Toronto about a guy who had superpowers. Flashback, I forget what it's called now. Okay. And I wrote to Peter, said, Peter, I just saw you on YouTube in this episode. And he'd almost like, he sort of played it off as he'd almost forgotten about it. I thought, wow.
Okay, well, I didn't even remember that myself. And I'm his the official biographer of
Peter's great.
Peter Groves.
Peter's amazing. He's so much fun.
Peter says the best lasagna he's ever had is made by Palma's Kitchen, Palma Pasta, and you're going to bring one home with you today. Shout out to Palma Pasta, who fed us all on Thursday night. We all collected at Great Lakes Brewery for TMLX 15. We all ate Palma Pasta. It was amazing. It was my birthday. It was the best birthday ever. The FOTMs gifted me a kayak. You mentioned you're a boating guy. Right. I have a foldable, it's like origami. You fold your kayak and you stick it in a backpack.
Wow, like papyrus reeds?
I'll show it to you before you leave.
Okay,
it's
cool.
unbelievable.
Yeah, nice.
And I bought myself a paddle that breaks into 4 parts and goes in the backpack. And I got myself a PFD that I attached to the backpack.
Nice, yeah. Important.
I'm so ready to get this thing. You know how close you are to the lake here.
Right down the Don, man.
I don't know if I'll get to the Don my first trip out, but I'm going to work my way there because the Humber River is beckoning right over here. But okay, I digress. Take me back. When did you realize, Jeff Chalmers, that you wanted to be on the radio?
You know, it's funny, growing up in Scarborough in the late 60s, early 70s, the advent of the home cassette decks.
Right.
My dad bought us bought for the house, a really cool tabletop Ampex cassette deck in, I think, 1969 from a stereo shop downtown Toronto. And you had the microphones, and it had those little DIN plugs on the back and the RCAs that we tapped into our Electro Home stereo with.
Right.
Do you recall, Mike, the first time you ever heard your voice on tape?
Sure.
It's the weirdest thing, right? You go, that's not me. That's not right.
I still think that when I hear myself.
Yeah, right. And so we played around with those tape decks for a long time. We had sound effects records at home. We thought were hilarious.
Wow.
And so, when you're at home and you're playing with these with audio and playing with sounds, it's a big part of what broadcasting is that. And in Toronto in the late 60s, being 10, 11, 12 years old, it was 1050 Chum. That was the station. Before CFTR, before Q107, you had CKOC in Hamilton doing top 40 radio.
Yeah, 1150.
Yeah, exactly. Legendary station.
Who were your favorite jocks on 1050? Do you remember who were the ones?
Tom Rivers, for sure.
Tom Rivers. Oh, I love Tom Rivers.
Was amazing.
Shout out to Larry Fedoruk real quick, who I was going to shout out when we get to the CFTR part, because that poster behind you, I don't know if you can see it on the wall there.
Right.
That's the Dr. Ruth ad that was in the subways to push Dr. Ruth's midnight show on 680. And nice. Larry gave that to me Thursday night. So shout out to Larry Fedoruk, who worked closely with Tom Rivers. Back to you, Jeff.
Yeah, no, but Scott Carpenter on Chum was incredible. They were
the greaser.
That was the art of AM radio. What these guys were doing, it was great. And thinking of 1050 Chum in the late 60s, early 70s, I'm thinking of songs like Crimson and Clover. I'm thinking of songs like Hair by the Cowsills, CCR, Shocking Blue by Venus. These are the songs that we were listening to on Chum back in the day. And it was the songs on AM radio sound huge. And when you have announcers who deliver these little sound packets over the intros of songs in such a beautiful, concise, artful way.
Is that the Drake format?
That is the Drake format.
Amazing.
No dead air. Just boom, boom, boom. And the hits just keep on coming. And you had in those days. I worked in the same gig is you had an operator, a board op. So the jocks, the announcers sat in their booth, and on the other side of the glass was the announcer. And at CFTR, where I worked in the mid 70s, there was this large McCurdy board, and we were all on carts, of course, back in those days in radio, cartridges, 2 tracks, and it was just a seamless sea of sound. It was beautiful.
So how do you end up at CFTR in 1976?
It was interesting. In Scarborough in the mid 70s, everybody had a CB radio. This is before, C.W. McCall came out with Convoy. That was
I was singing in my head right now.
That was beautiful.
We
Right?
got a great big convoy.
So that was, I think, November of 76 that came out. But we all had CB radios, and that was the culture, and you had to get a license back then for these things. So driving to Young and Eglinton to the ministry to get a federal license for this thing, getting the license, the 23 channel before 40 channel CB radios were out, 23 channels in the 68 Corolla, right? 4-speed, non-synchro mesh,
Wow.
1100 cc's of power, total rust bucket, my mom's old car with this CB. Tooling around Scarborough, meeting at donut shops. And I met a guy at this donut shop one night.
Mike Myers.
Exactly. Quintessential. Headbanging to Queen. I mean, it was just perfect. And this gentleman I met one night volunteered at a place in Scarborough called Wired City Cable.
Okay.
It was before Rogers came into the scene.
Okay.
Wired City Cable had a TV station upstairs where they did local programming. There's a show called Watt's World with Bill Watt, discussing the local issues of the day. Hey, how about that new Toronto Scarborough Town Center? Anyway, it's that kind of thing. And then in the basement was a little radio studio. And they said, Jeff, we have an opening. Would you like to do Sunday nights in the radio studio? I thought, wow, this is really interesting. So those days on Channel 10, if you recall,
Of course.
they would have sort of this very basic
McLean Hunter, right? Wasn't it McLean Hunter before Rogers?
It may
Or at
have
least
been.
it depended on your neighborhood, I
Yeah.
think.
Well,
But
in
yeah.
Scarborough in 1975, we had Channel 10. They would invariably play CHFI, who at the time were still playing beautiful music. And so you'd have this sort of this news feed going around.
Okay.
And then, but on Sundays, they'd play the feed from the little radio station downstairs. Wow. And so I went out and bought the Chum Top 30 on 45 from Sam the Record Man downtown.
Who, by the way, just to pull full circle again, okay, the son of Sam, okay, that's not Berkowitz, by the way, was in Blue Peter.
Yeah.
Jason Snyderman.
Who was playing keys the night I saw Chalk Circle that night.
Okay, yeah, the Chalk Circle Blue Peter synergies are epic. This is wild. I'm loving this.
And
Jeff.
this is a quintessential Toronto sound. It really is. That Blue Peter, Chalk Circle sound. And we play both those bands currently at the station I'm with now, Boom 97.3.
Yes.
And when we play these songs, I get so excited. It's incredible to play these songs because they're timeless.
Yep.
They're beautiful. So anyway, that was what we were doing, and I was doing this radio show on Wired City Cable, and one Monday someone said, "Hey Jeff, we saw you on the TV last night playing music." I went, "Wow, this is amazing."
You're famous.
Yeah, famous, totally famous, like 4 listeners, if. And so that was sort of the beginning of my interest in radio. But listening to the radio, in high school, there was a station across the lake still there. WGR 55, GR 55.
Sure, they had the Buffalo Bills games.
Yeah, but at the time, before it was a sports station, it was an MOR station, and they had, they had a lot of jocks. Brother Shane did the evening show, and then from Sunday to Thursday, from 11:30 till 2 a.m. was a talk show, a call-in show, local show, hosted by a gentleman by the name of John Otto. And John Otto had this beautiful golden radio voice and a great command of the language. It didn't have that Western New York accent, which I love, but just a guy who could be from anywhere. And he had this wonderful way I found of communicating. He was so warm and he was so real and himself. I could hear him lying in bed with my headphones on. I could tell I knew he smoked cigarettes. I could hear that Zippo.
That's how you
lighter.
get the good voice.
Yeah, well, exactly. Anyway, he was such an inspiration for me. He had cheesy sound effects. He had a great sense of humor.
Yeah.
He had jingles, and it was a talk show. And it could be a trivia show. It could be a general come me all, as he called it, talking about whatever the issues were in Buffalo, in that community.
Usually it's a fire.
Yeah, well, that was a lot of that too. But that was really an inspiration for me, the way he connected with listeners. It's all about connecting with people. And for me, he connected with me. And that was a huge
Okay, so
inspiration.
before we get to the CFTR, I just want to shout out on the live stream, live.torontomike.com. I always want to shout out Jeremy Hopkin. He's the official historian of the Toronto Mike podcast. He's talking about on the live stream that Chalk Circle's Mending Wall features the Scarborough Bluffs on the cover. The Bluffs are on the cover, and he thought that was pretty neat. I also want to shout out Midtown Gourd who says, when I did my 1-hour radio show on Q107 in 1987, because I was a metalhead, Live Earl Jive assumed I was from Scarborough. So apparently Scarborough was the breeding ground for the metalheads back in the day. Now get yourself, Jeff, to 680 CFTR.
It was great. I went to this open house. My mother cut an article out of the paper, a little ad out of the paper. And it wasn't the NIB, the National Institute of Broadcasting, who for decades, for scores, advertised in the Toronto Sun. The NIB, and it ran forever. It was a private radio school. But there was another subsequent school that my mother noticed because she knew I was into radio or wanted to get into radio. So I think it was called Career Canada. And she cut this ad out. I had to go to this open house, right? I chose to go to this open house downtown Toronto. And hosting it was Chums, Scott Carpenter, and CFTR's Pat Bergen, right? And CFTR's the late Paul Godfrey.
Okay.
And so we went
different Paul Godfrey.
Yeah,
Right.
He went by your Metro Music chairman.
Okay.
But Paul Godfrey, the politician, was the chairman at the city of Toronto.
Right.
At the time. Anyway, so I went to this open house to meet these people, and it was all very good. And I went home, and that was great. And I thought I should follow up with these jocks. And so I called Scott Carpenter, and I said, "Hey, man, I just went to your open house at this Career Canada thing, and I'm working in cable radio, TV. I want to get into real radio. Any advice?" He said, "Well, have you taken the course yet?" I said, "Well, no. I just went to the open house." He said, "Well, take the course." I said, "Well, good advice. Thank you, man. I appreciate that." Called Paul Godfrey. Paul Godfrey called me back. I thought, "Oh my God, I'm sitting out on my parents' bed on the beige rotary phone. It's Paul Godfrey from CFTR calling our house.
Wow.
Calling me." And he said, "Jeff, why don't you give our operations manager, Chris Brooks, a call?" So I was very excited.
Yeah.
Called this guy. He said, "Jeff, your timing is really interesting. One of our operators is getting an on-air gig down east. We have an opening. Do you want to come in and talk about it?" So I went downtown to CFTR, 25 Adelaide Street East. Beautiful building. Gorgeous, squatty building right downtown. And began training in about March or April of 76, just finishing up grade 12. We'd had a strike. There was a school strike that year. So we've been off for weeks and weeks and weeks.
Okay.
So you sort of lost interest in school. So when you're 16, 17 in Scarborough with a car, with a CB radio, and you're young and full of life, and it's all about the radio, and there it was. And so nice. I was training at CFTR on the all-night show. Do you know what Toronto smells like on a hot summer morning at 6 o'clock when you finish your training and you get off the air and you're right downtown, and it's a humid day in the mid-70s? There's a certain beautiful stench to the city. There's a quiet din. Wow. The subways wouldn't start until 7 o'clock, I believe, on Sundays.
Right.
So one had to get up to, I used to walk up to the Young Bloor line to get up back out to Guildwood. You take the train to Warden and the 86A or the 86A out Kingston Road. And it was just a beautiful thing to be walking around Toronto at 6 o'clock on a Sunday morning in the summertime.
Hot time, summer in the city.
Love and Spoonful. We were playing that. And CFTR at that time, you talk about the universe. They had a huge universe of songs they were playing. This is just on the cusp of disco, okay? So You think about CFTR, AM radio in the mid-70s. When I think about, I learned so much about R&B music back then because I wasn't aware of these bands. But I got introduced very quickly to the Stylistics, Delphonics, Marvin Gaye, Tammy Terrell. We were playing bands like The Tramps, Chairman of the Board, The Five Stairsteps. It was incredible. And these songs sounded great on AM radio. And you had jingles at CFTR, you had cold voice IDs, you had top hour IDs, which at CFTR in the mid-70s was the guy came on, the announcer came on, and it was CFTR, all hits, all the time, and the timpani drums. And it was just this beautiful, statement. Here we are. This is CFTR. And it was big, and it was AM, and the jocks had this great reverb on the microphone. There was huge compression. It was a seamless, like you say, Drake format. Ordeal. It was really fun. It was really cool. And as an operator, your job is to keep it tight. You don't want any dead air.
Right.
And it was so that the jocks would talk up. If there was an intro on the commercials, you would talk that up.
Wow.
Right. So it'd be marked on the carts. Like Susie Shear, Dialects was the company. It would say 3.5 to vocal on the commercials.
Wow.
So not only would you talk up the song, or the jocks would talk up, backsell the song, and be no dead air. You get out of the song before it faded out. Then you talk up the commercial. It was that seamless.
It's exciting.
Yeah, it was great, man.
And no room for error. Like, I'm so excited just hearing your passion for it too.
Oh,
man.
it's great.
I'm
man.
digging this so much because my introduction to CFTR is several years later, and in fact, Tom Rivers in the morning. So you're there in 76. Now, quickly, you mentioned the other Paul Godfrey. So the political Paul Godfrey, who's still with us. Fun fact for you, Jeff, is that his son is part of the ownership group that just bought the Toronto Maple Leafs baseball team.
Wow, what a
Isn't that
tie-in.
fun? Isn't that wild? Like, all these things are connecting.
15-13, man.
Yeah, 15-13. Is that the right number? I butchered it off the top.
I know it.
But I have.
Wow.
And it's under your camera there. But that book is the history of Toronto Maple Leafs baseball. They play at Christie Pitts. And I'm going to be there next Sunday at 2 p.m. recording live from just beyond the left field fence.
The Toronto Maple Leafs Baseball Club.
You been to any games at Christie Pitts?
A winning team.
Well, we're getting there, but they have won at least since the Toronto Maple Leafs Hockey Club. I have the number here. There has been 8 championships for this Toronto Maple Leafs since 1967. So
Christie Pitts, right?
Christie Pitts,
Beautiful.
2 p.m. on Sunday. So come on out. If you did come by, I'd throw you on. With Mike Richards is going to be there with me, but I'm going to have a third mic where a bunch of people are just cycled in. If you showed up, Jeff, I'd throw you on the mic and find out what's the feedback from your Toronto mic, your highly anticipated Toronto mic debut.
Amazing. Thank you for having me, by the way.
Oh, thanks for being here.
Yeah,
Thanks
really
for being here.
appreciate it.
Keith Stein, by the way, is the other owner of the Toronto Maple Leafs baseball team, and we'll try to get him on the mic as well on Sunday. But great baseball, no ticket required. Shout out to Phil Collins, no ticket required. And you get to grab a beer. Think the fuzz, man. This is the age we live in. The fuzz can't get you for drinking a beer.
The fuzz. Nice.
I'm taking myself back to 1976, okay? The fuzz can't bust you for drinking a beer in Christie Pitts anymore. Isn't that amazing? Good food. It's amazing. So I hope everybody comes out, says hi, enjoys some high-quality baseball. That's the most important thing here. Okay, now I want to get you to Q107. You have more than one tour of duty. You have at least 3 tours of duty at Q107, Jeff. This is where I'm introduced to Jeff Chalmers. But you're at CFTR, so maybe shout out some of the people on the air at CFTR in 1976, and then at some point, I know you go to Oshawa before you get to Q, but get yourself to Q107.
Right. So did you want the lineup at CFTR?
Yeah. I'm like a historian here myself.
Right. So when I was there in 70s, I was there 76 to 79. So I was 17 to 20 years old.
So young.
It was still Jim Brady in the morning.
Yeah.
The shifts outside of the morning show were 3 hours. Can you imagine that? 3-hour show. Yeah. Never mind a 3-hour tour, a 3-hour show. So it was
Gilligan's Island.
It was Jim Brady who had his own operator, Carlton Rampashad, great guy. He was the soul guy. He was his guy. Then you had a rotating series of ops who opt for the jocks. And it was Paul Godfrey, your Metro Music chairman, who did 9 to noon. Dick Joseph, who did noon to 3. Red Knight, who was my hero.
Okay. I don't even know this name. I'm listening so closely.
Peter Thompson is the gentleman's name, Red Knight. Then it was Bill Edwards. Then it was Bobby Day. And they had other jocks. Mike Christie did the all-night show. There was Glenn Walters, who's a legendary broadcaster, Big G.
Wow.
And you had Don Beefer, who we just lost a few months ago. Those were sort of the mainstays of CFTR when I was there. And
you weren't on the air, right? You were
no, it wasn't on the air.
Okay,
no,
but you must have had the dream was to get yourself on the air.
Well, you're working with these guys,
yeah,
and you think, wow, this is cool, pushing buttons and stuff. But I want to sit on that side of the glass.
Yeah.
Listen to how they're introing these songs.
Well, Stu Jeffrey does both.
Stu's amazing. Stu's great. Stu's a great communicator. He's a really, really, really cool guy. And I know Stu Jeffries. I know this guy. I know this guy.
Good rocking tonight, Stu Jeffries.
Oh, yeah. With the hair, right?
The muscles.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's got the best hair. You and I have great hair.
Right.
Stu's jealous of us.
Yeah,
right
no,
now, but
go
that's
to-
why he's overcompensating with the muscles.
Well, no, go to his Facebook page. It was like he's wearing, like a tank top to show off his guns.
Oh yeah, he's one of those guys who he buys shirts that are intentionally too small.
Oh,
right?
for sure.
So he's wearing small.
No,
Get yourself a medium,
No, this
Stu.
is what
We're
he
sick
does.
of this shit.
No, it's ridiculous. He takes like Boom Mighty 7.3 t-shirts and he cuts the sleeves off.
Any chance you'll cry in this episode? Because Stu cried in his Toronto Mike debut.
Stu cries all the time. And I'll just, if I can just interject, I cried last night on the air.
Oh, how come?
And we'll get to the
When we
cute
get
thing.
to okay,
Well, very briefly, you're talking about Stu. Stu's very emotional. He's very in touch with his feelings.
which is beautiful.
But it was Canada Day yesterday, obviously, and we played some Lightfoot. Wayne Webster, our legendary music director.
FOTM Wayne Webster.
The guy's incredible. And he's been around for a zillion years. 15, 13. He programs the music on Boom 97.3 as he does for the Stingray brand across the country. Anyway, we played Joni Mitchell, Both Sides Now.
Yeah.
Right. So this is a song that Judy Collins made famous, and it's been done by different people over the years. But to hear Joni's version of the song on Canada Day, on my show, I was on the air yesterday, and listening to it with when you're listening to FM radio with the headphones on, man, it sounds good. And hearing the song and the words and the way she delivered it,
right?
That'll
do it.
It did it for me. And I had to kind of like that. If you go to a little bit, it's a little bit kind of Stu Jeffries. We had so it was really cool. So that affects you, and that's the thing, right? Let yourself be you. You're very you.
But you couldn't have done that in the 70s. Like, this is a new phenomenon where jocks can be emotional on the air. Am I right?
Yeah, you have to. This is the whole thing, right?
Okay.
Be you.
Be yourself.
That's
like if I could be someone else, I would be that person.
Right.
So I'm stuck with this guy, and I have to be authentic because I didn't go through the radio training that you did.
Well, I didn't have a lot of radio training. On air.
Did you ever take that course, Scott Carpenter?
No, I never took the course because I called Paul Godfrey and I met Chris Brooks. I was pushing buttons.
The greaser gives you an aura, you do it, buddy.
It was incredible to work at CFTR, and then it was like, okay, we want to get on the air, and what's the trick? So putting together a tape in the studio, and at the time, I mean, songs like Barracuda by Heart were current songs.
Right.
That was on my audition tape. Barracuda by Heart. I mean, we play it today. It sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Right? And
well, I'm pretty sure that qualifies as CanCon.
That's all the way.
So, I mean, we got force fed that one.
Mushroom Records, man. It was fantastic. But
to the Vietnam War and the draft dodger boyfriends.
Exactly. To Vancouver, and amazing band, great band.
Yeah.
So I got a tape together, horrible tape, and sent it out to Oshawa. George Grant, who was the George Grant was the sales manager at Rogers at CHFI, and he arranged to purchase from Lakeland Broadcasting the property in Oshawa, which was 1350 CKAR, and its FM side as well, which was CKQT. He was playing beautiful music, and George took this traditional AM station and flipped the format to CHR. And I got a job doing evenings at 1350 CKAR in Oshawa, which was close enough. Didn't have to pack up.
I was about to tell it. Yeah, Jeff, a lot of people come on there. Yeah, I had to go to Thunder Bay or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like Oshawa's a pretty sweet deal. You're still in the GTA.
Yeah, I'm living at home still, right? It's fantastic.
So you're CFTR, but opping, you're not on the air, but you want to get on the air. So you go put in some reps in Oshawa, which is like a little drive. And then your next stop's going to be the mighty Q. Well, Q107 in 1981.
That's right.
Okay, so with all due respect to CKAR, I'm very interested in how do you get on the air at Q107? Then I have like a bunch of questions for you.
Well, I knew a lot of guys at the station. Lee Eckley and I grew up together. I've known Lee.
Love that guy.
Yeah, great guy, Lee Beef. We just had lunch together a month ago out there.
He's really a sweetheart.
He's great. I've known Lee since 1966.
Wow.
We were in grade 2. We went to the same schools. We're from
mind blow.
No, we're from Guildwood. We're from Guildwood Village, man. This is what we do.
I just went to a wedding last summer at the Guildwood Inn.
At the Guild Inn, yes. Yeah, legendary place. Where Lee and I worked as busboys there back in 73, 74. Wow. Fantastic place to work on the bluffs. I knew Lee Eckley.
But you and Lee, you're you know each other in grade 2, and you both end up on our airwaves,
quite
delivering the rock and roll.
Quite coincidentally, it was quite.
So that's not like you're not in cahoots here.
No, we both ended up in broadcasting,
That's
and
wild.
ended up working together at Q107. Lee was doing the evening show, I believe, when I got there in '80. He left shortly thereafter for Chum FM, and I think '84 or something. But so I knew a couple of people at Q107. I'd met Gary Slade. I'd met Scruff before. I'd gone to a couple of events, I guess, shows, and so I knew a couple of people. So.
Sure.
I wasn't a complete stranger when I applied for a job there, and I got a job there doing weekend all nights at Q107, which at the time was at 2 Bloor Street East, 30th floor, the Hudson's Bay Center. The sign came down recently, but that's a 35-story building on the northeast corner of Yonge and Bloor, which is now dwarfed, by the way, by 1 Bloor Street East, which is 76 stories,
Right.
and dwarfs Q107, or at least the Hudson's Bay Center, which was at the time this beautiful perch from which to broadcast, because 35 story building, Q was on the 30th floor, and the control room, the studio, looked south. So a little askew, but looking south down Yonge Street. So can you imagine 1981, I'm 22 years old, we're playing vinyl, it's Q107.
Yeah.
Right? The station's 5 years old.
Yeah.
And I'm doing the all night show. And it was a mind blower, because it was a huge station. It was a massive station at the time. You know, it was where it was at.
Well, shout out to FOTM Dave Charles.
Dave Charles, yeah, great consultant.
Big part of the launch of that.
Joint
of that
Communications.
station.
Yeah. John Pericol.
Yeah, now I need you. So you're there, I said, 3 tours of duty at Q107. This is 1981, the first time you arrived. You're a young man, like you said there. So Lee Eckley, you said, was there, but who else was there at Q107 in 1981 when you get there?
Keith Alshaw was doing Afternoon Drive. Okay. Keith was incredible. And you talk about communicating. I got there about 3.5 weeks after John Lennon was shot. Wow. And Keith Alshaw, I'll never forget it, as he was talking about it, and he made me cry as a listener. And then that's a very, very, to do that, to make someone, to evoke that emotion in someone by using words is very powerful. And he was really good at that. And he was a very talented voiceover guy and a great communicator. Really a big fan of Keith Alshaw on the radio. He was doing a drive. Jim Bauer, who was came from Chum FM when Chum FM was a rock station years ago. Was doing middays, I believe. Okay. Lee was doing evenings. Bobby Gale, whom we lost a few years ago, had just left, I believe, the Gale Force. He did evenings on Q before Lee Eckley did. Samantha Taylor,
from Video Hits.
Yeah, was there doing weekends.
I'm show you something
Tasha
again.
Sims.
This is an audio presentation, but have you seen this? This was gifted to me by Joel Goldberg, a.k.a. Jay Gold back then. He had a show on CFTR back then. Mm-hmm. But this is like the early video jocks. And
John Major.
John Major's there.
Yeah. Chris Ward.
Yeah, I can't see what you see, but let me see here. Okay, so.
J.D. Roberts.
So Shirley McQueen.
Yeah.
Shout out to Shirley McQueen. Catherine McClenahan, who was the first woman VJ on Much Music.
Married to Gene Velitis for a while.
Oh, God damn it. These connections are unbelievable. But yeah, Samantha Taylor's in this pick. Erica M's in this pick. J.D. Roberts, like you said. Michael Williams is in this pick as well.
Yeah, it's a cool poster.
There you go.
You should get that plaque before you crease it.
What? You're right. I better get this plaqued before I crease it. Well said, man. You're a sage, wise man. Okay. But, okay, so was Shirley McQueen there? Not in 81. No?
Yeah, not. So she came later. She came later. But there,
was John Donaby there?
John Donaby was there at the time. He came back a couple of times himself. He was doing.
Love that guy too.
He's great. What a voice! What a beautiful voice he has.
Just what a legend. Okay, all these legends we're talking about here. And is Scruff Connors there?
Scruff Connors was doing the morning show, the Q Morning Zoo, in 1980. When I got there in 81, he was still there, yes.
And Gene Velitis is on that show?
Gene was co-hosting with Scruff, the Q Morning Zoo, which you would never get away with today. the features that were on that show beat the baloney. I mean, it was just ridiculous. Between the sheets, whereby, female callers would dial into the radio station and 870-9152 would be seduced by the morning host, making all kinds of suggestive, statements, and the music's playing.
Innuendo,
and everything else. Yeah, oh my goodness.
Double entendres.
All of it. All of the above, really.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm loving these stories, Jeff. This is unbelievable. Okay, so why do you leave Q107 after this first tour of duty?
I wanted to do other things. I want to talk about the Midnight Metal Hour on Q107.
Okay.
I can just
well, yeah, actually, I got questions about the Midnight. So
okay,
W Beach says Midnight Metal Hour memories would be awesome. So we're
okay. We can talk about that now.
Yeah,
but okay. Well, so in the early '80s there was this resurgence of metal, and there were from Great Britain was what was called the new wave of British heavy metal. So you had bands like Iron Maiden and Judas Priest, and you had Rainbow. You had a lot of bands that were doing this format, and
shout out to Martin Popoff. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, no,
he covers this all the time. Absolutely loving this.
And so Bob Makowitz, who was music director at the time, great guy. We just lost Bob recently. Great guy. Had a lot of fun working with him. A lot of respect for that broadcaster, Rochelle. Rochdale. The decision was made to do this show that would run on, I guess, Saturdays at midnight. And they said, Jeff, you're going to host it. And I didn't really grow up with heavy metal. I was more into, I grew up with AM radio, and I love that. And, my parents had, Peter, Paul, and Mary, and the Beatles, and Trini Lopez in the local collection. We played on the Electro Home. With the Ampex cassette deck. And, so I said, okay. And of course, there's no internet. And so there was Kerrang! Magazine, which was a metal magazine. Yeah. And so I was tapped to do the show. And I was very excited because it was new, and it was the music was really aggressive. Yeah. And we were playing these bands on the radio anyway on Q107. So we sat down, did Bob and I one afternoon, and we formatted the show. What features are we going to have? What contests? And I will tell you, and I should have brought something in, but I saved all the mail from that show. Wow. Because it meant so much to me that people would respond the way they did. And I have been in touch with people in recent times. And that was, think about that. That's 40 years ago or more than that's 43 years ago. We did that show, right? And people still remember it, but, it was a show that, reached a lot of young men, and I used to solicit a lot of contests through mail because there was no internet. So you'd mail things in, and these young guys would decorate their envelopes with artwork. So there'd be Eddie on the envelope in pencil crayon, and you'd get these great big. I have them at home. They'd come in these brown envelopes. Posters. These people would devise. And the other thing about this show was when the bands came through, Jeff, you're doing the interviews,
right? Because you're the metal guy.
I'm the metal.
You're the Q107. You're the original Q107 metal guy.
I'm not the metal queen. That's Lee Aaron. I was the metal king.
Shout out to FOTM Karen. Absolutely.
She's amazing. Yeah, she's great. Attic Records. Anyway, so all these bands came.
Shout
through.
out to Ridley Funeral Home on the Attic Records. So
we've
lost them both now.
Right.
Almaire and and Williams. Yeah.
So the all these bands came through, and I guess that was. You think about it today. Do bands still come through and do these tours anymore? I don't know if they do that. But all the major acts were signed to the major labels. Everybody came through. So I'm
just not sure there's anywhere to go except my basement. Like these guys are coming through town and it's like, hey, yeah, we can drop by. I just had Honeymoon Suite here, and I was thinking, oh, that's amazing, Honeymoon Suite's here. And I'm like, oh yeah, back in the day, all these radio stations would probably want them or Much Music and all that, and it's all dried up.
Yeah. So I mean, bands like Bruce Dickinson from Iron Maiden came through. Joe Elliott from Def Leppard came through, and we're around the same age. I'm thinking, here's this guy. Yeah. And they're only like, this was like maybe 2-3 albums in, and they're still new.
Are you at Pyromania yet?
We're at well, there's
the first big one. Right?
Yeah, that was the first big one. Following up, I guess High and Dry, or On Through the Night was first, then High and Dry, I guess, and then, but these guys were in early 20s, and they're doing this music, and they're signed to major labels, and they're doing these world tours. Klaus Meine and Rudolf Schenker of the Scorpions came through, and they were incredible together. And they're sitting, and the studio at Q107 at the time, the interview studio, was this really dark. Everything was brown, man. It was this dark brown, wall covering.
That's left over from the 70s.
Oh, it's really beige, completely beige, with the beautiful Neumann microphones, the U87s, right, and the Ampex 440 reel-to-reel decks, and you've got the interview going on, and you're cocooned in this, dead space in terms of the acoustics. To interview these guys, and the level of professionalism that I witnessed through these people who came through. Brian May from Queen came through. It was a mind blower. Ozzy, right? All these bands came through, and it was an opportunity to sit there and talk about the new album. Rob Halford from Judas Priest, and of course the big album back then was the album that broke them was Screaming for Vengeance, and they were touring the record, and Rob came through, and unlike a lot of other bands who came through radio stations for interviews on these promo tours, Rob was decked out in leather. He had the leather pants on. He had the Civil War boots going on.
Yeah.
He had the kind of like a leather mesh, tank top going on. At the time, he had really short, dyed blonde hair. And he was still in the closet. And I'll never forget it. It was kind of a compliment, actually. Yeah. When I walked out and he said, "Rob, this is Jeff Chalmers. He's going to be doing the interview with you." And it was the CBS rep, I guess. And Rob gave me the one over. It's like, I thought, wow, Rob Halford, this metal god is checking me out, man. It's fantastic. And so we had a great conversation.
Amazing.
In the studio. But it was a great opportunity to meet a lot of really cool bands who they're still legit today. There's still music still being played and still respected. It's really cool. And to go to the show, that's the quintessential thing. The bands come through the studio, you interview them, then you go to the show, whether it's a club, whether it's a C&E grandstand or whatever it is. So that was a really big part of that experience at Q107 for me was connecting with these listeners who still bring it up today.
Well, metalheads are passionate. Passionate fans, we have one on the live stream, so we mentioned him already, but Midtown Gord points out he listened all the time, so he was listening to you on the Midnight Metal Hour, and he's loving these memories, and as am I. And I'm thinking you saved all that stuff sent to you. We should digitize that and save it with the universe, man. Like I could work with you on that. Like I'm all about now. Like I just want to archive shit so I could put it somewhere so it can be easily found and consumed by the next kid who wants to catch up on what he missed.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Very quickly, I was at CMW.
You don't even have to do it quickly, buddy. Go take your time.
CMW. We had a theme. There was a series of themes over the years that show ran. The intro of the show, and at one point I used an Anvil song. And because we were huge fans of Anvil, Attic Records again, and they were great guys. And
a Tobacco band, right?
Yeah. And they were, there was Lips and Steve, and we saw them. We see the Macombo or Larry's, and it was. I wanted to showcase them, so we used an Anvil song on the intro. And years later, about 10 years ago, I was at CMW at some event, and Lips was there, and I saw him. I said, "Dude, hey man," he said, "Jeff, March of the Crabs." That was the song we used, this instrumental song from, maybe it was on Metal on Metal, I forget.
Metal. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, so that was,
and really to remind people, as if we need to remind this audience about the pre-internet days, but really, if you were a metalhead and you wanted to consume new metal music, right, like there weren't a lot of outlets. Like at some point, Much Music introduced the Pepsi Power Hour or something like that. But like, I can't imagine on the Toronto airwaves there was anywhere else to go to get like a metal hour.
No, there was nowhere to go.
No, you were it, man.
It was incredible, and it was an hour show, and it required a lot of prep. There were different features, heavy metal favorites. We did music news, like any radio show would go in an hour long format. But
Sure.
it was a really gratifying experience, and I'll never forget how passionate the listenership was, and that's why I continue to I've got those things, man. All those envelopes, all that mail. I kept all that stuff. That means a lot to me.
We gotta digitize that. Share that with you.
Yeah, man.
That's amazing. Now,
Eddie lives.
Eddie lives. Now, yeah, right. Now, there are two names you dropped, which I find interesting as I listen to you. You dropped, of course, Bob Makowitz Sr. and Scruff Connors, and neither of whom ever appeared on Toronto Mic'd, but both are no longer with us. But both of they have sons who have appeared. So
Yeah.
shout out to Bob Makowitz Jr., who's an FOTM like you, Jeff. Welcome to the club. And TJ Connors, who does a great Scruff impression. TJ Connors has been on the program.
Yeah, I know
so.
Tyler. Yep. Nice
He's
guy.
selling real estate now.
He is. He's in Winnipeg. Does very well. He's married. He's got two beautiful kids. He's close with his mother, and he's done well. Yeah.
Beautiful stuff. Okay, so your first tour of duty at Q107 comes to an end, and you end up at CBC Radio?
I love CBC Radio. I love listening to CBC Radio.
I need to hear this story.
Who
Okay.
doesn't
I love CBC. It's my go-to
I love
station.
CBC Radio. I mean, you talk about talk radio, and this is really in-depth stuff and really intelligent programming. And I mean, a lot of people don't like CBC Radio. I happen to be a big fan of CBC Radio, so
But the people who don't like it have politicized it somehow.
well, exactly.
So they see it as like, I'm a card-carrying conservative. I'm not allowed to like this voice box for liberal points
Right,
of view.
yeah.
And this is primarily ignorance from people who just don't tune in.
These are people who don't like bike lanes. Okay.
Right. Listen, you're a boater. Are you a biker too?
I love cycling. I
like you already.
On the way here, I stopped at the corner over here and sold a guy a telephone mount for handlebars. Seriously, before I got here. So
Like just randomly? I don't
no.
understand. You were just who needs it?
No. It was arranged beforehand.
Okay.
I said, listen, I've got an appointment with
Yeah. So you're like, I'll
Toronto
meet you at the
Mike.
corner of X and Y, and
I met
at
him
this time.
met him at the corner of X and Y 15 minutes before I met you,
Amazing.
and sold him this phone mount, Topeak phone mount. So
Okay.
I love cycling. I'm into cycling. I have a couple of nice bikes, and
Okay, I'm coming off my most cycled month of my life,
Oh, wow.
which is June 2024.
well, what's your bike? What are you riding?
It's a single speed, right behind you. It's a single speed Fuji Feather, one
cool.
speed, and I go everywhere on that thing.
Single speed, beautiful.
Yeah, single speed.
How do you like it?
And I swear, I love it. Well, I love it. I've been riding it for a few years now.
Yeah.
Love it so much. But it's funny because I track every ride, and I don't know what the number was, 1377 or something
Why
like
am I
that.
not following you on Strava?
Well, you should. Toronto Mike.
Okay.
Follow me, and I'll follow you back.
Okay, cool.
Do you follow Scott Turner?
I do follow Scott Turner.
He's listening right now.
He
He's
is
excited
a-
about your episode. And that guy bikes a shit
Great
ton
guy,
too.
really good broadcaster, great voice, good delivery, smooth.
He's retired now.
Yeah, I don't know how he did it.
I don't know
in
either.
radio. How do you do it? You're making nothing.
Well, shout out one of the greats. I feel like
No, he's great. He's a good broadcaster. We worked
he's a
together
legend.
in Hamilton years ago.
He's going to do a podcast with Ivor Hamilton. This is the rumor. Now, who will produce it? I don't know. I pitched my production services, but my phone never rang. So who knows? I'm going to listen to it regardless. I want to hear Scott Turner and Ivor Hamilton and their new podcast whenever it arrives.
Yeah. Okay,
I'm all in.
cool.
Okay.
Yeah. So CBC
you
Radio.
like CBC as I do, but how do you end up at CBC Radio?
I applied for a job. I went down there and I forget what the process was. Obviously, pre-internet, it was 85 pre-internet, and I got a job as a technician, which is pretty well an operator. You're pushing buttons in the studio.
Sure.
And at the time, this is before the big CBC broadcast location.
This is
went up.
740, right? You're on. Is that where you'd listen to CBC Radio 740?
Yeah, I guess so. AM, yeah, before they moved to 99.1.
Sure.
So yeah, 740, not a great signal, but they were there. Not great in the city anyway.
Shout out to Peter Zowski.
Yeah, Peter's great. Morningside, Wayne Gretzky. But I bought a Peter Zowski mug also off Facebook Marketplace. Not today.
Okay.
But I've got
That'd
this
be a
little,
mind-blower.
I wanted to have this Peter Zowski Morningside mug that I paid $20 for,
Okay.
which is so beautiful. At the time, CBC had buildings scattered through the downtown core because
Right.
the big broadcast center hadn't been established yet. So
Right.
there was a studio, the morning show. Was Joe Cote doing the morning show? I forget now. There was an old theater on Parliament Street. That's where the morning show came out of. I was working, I did a couple of tenures there at CBC, working for Radio Sports. They were on Church Street. But the main headquarters really was at Carlton and Jarvis, just sort of on the track, if you will,
Right.
on the west side of Jarvis, north of Carlton, near the
There's
Harveys.
a great NFB film. I see it on the archives. You can watch it online from this era about CBC Radio, and you see all these buildings you're talking about on Jarvis and everything, and it's wild.
This building on Jarvis was an old girls' school back in the day.
Okay.
And I was
Shout out to Edna Garrett.
Oh, it's fantastic. What a gorgeous building. This beautiful red brick building. You know, Jarvis, these are all these stately homes back in the day, right? On Jarvis Street with the trees. It's beautiful. Anyway, this was an old girls' school, and CBC had been in there for many, many years. And I was downstairs in the basement. I was working at one point in something called Radio Stores, and you are responsible for distributing gear to go out on live broadcasts.
Okay.
They would mic at church to record an orchestra. So you'd hand out the gear, the board, the mic, the cables, whatever, the snakes. And I was in the basement one day, and this was in 85, and the straw targets, the archery targets for the girls' school were still there, tucked away in a dark, dingy corner. Reminded me of CFTR in 76, that smell of the city in the morning.
You paint a nice picture. You should be on the radio.
Wow, fun. So CBC Radio was great. Met a lot of really talented people. It's really different because you're working in a studio and you're feeding the master control room. So before a broadcast, you test it and you feed a tone down to master. It all checks out, and they come in and do their thing. A lot of times you're sitting in the studio, producing reports or clips or stories or something. So,
But don't you have that itch to get your voice back on the air?
well, I did, and I got back at Q107, and I was doing both.
But aren't we skipping something? Are we missing something? Okay, so CBC Radio. Quick aside here, because we do that on this little tangents here. We have the time to roll them a little bit.
Right.
Is that Neil Herland, who now reads news for CBC Radio in here in 2024, does a great job. Lots of times before I go to bed, I listen to CBC Radio news update, like the quick cap, see what's going on, and it's often his voice when I'm going to sleep there. But Neil Herland was not allowed to accept any gifts when he came on Toronto Mike, which was very recently. I'd say a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago. No gifts. I found that interesting. Like, I'm going to give you something right now, Jeff, and because you don't work for CBC, you'll be able to accept it. Some fresh craft beer from Great Lakes Brewery.
Wow, thank you.
That pairs nicely with your Palma Pasta lasagna.
Yeah, it does.
And a measuring tape from Ridley Funeral Home. You can measure whatever you like, Jeff.
Can I measure how much time I have left?
I don't think that works that way, but you can try. You can do that. Time is not a linear. No, okay. And last but not least, a piece of advice, which is if you have any old devices, old cables, old electronics, don't throw that in the garbage because those chemicals end up in our landfill. Go to recyclemyelectronics.ca and then punch in your postal code, and then they'll come back and say, hey, Jeff, there's a depot near a location right near you where you can drop that off, and it will be properly recycled.
Yeah, I've got a 1973 cassette deck from Radio Shack.
It doesn't function anymore?
The heads are shot, but it still plays.
Well, when it breaks down, don't throw it out. Go to recyclemyelectronics.ca. Okay, so the Neil Herland thing, which I found interesting, that CBC Radio person told basically don't accept any gifts. And then I had Bob Ray on last week.
Right, I saw that,
Ray,
yeah.
Took everything, he's literally Canada's ambassador to the United Nations, and he's got his Great Lakes beer, he's got his Palma Pasta lasagna, he's got his Toronto Maple Leafs baseball history book, he's got his measuring tape, and here's a gift for you. Bruce Dobigan, who worked for the CBC for many years.
Bruce, yeah, TV.
So Bruce Dobigan and his son wrote a book, and they self-published it. Yeah, Bruce, bright guy. He was indoctrinated when he moved out west. His politics became modified, I would call it, but bless his heart, he's a great writer. Steve Paikin wrote the foreword on this book, but this is called Deal With It, the trades that stunned the NHL and changed hockey. And you can take that with you too,
Thank
Jeff.
you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Self-published by Bruce and his son, Evan.
Nice. Big fan of those.
His Evan, I think, lives in either Long Branch or Alderwood, but somewhere near here.
I watched Bruce on TV at CBC for many years.
He was great. He helped bring down Alan Eagleson.
I was working the night in Radio Sports, the night that Gretzky got traded.
That's in that book. It's the big one. Yeah.
It was, and I believe Rod Smith was on the air that night, and we were working together.
Okay, great voice.
And he said, great voice.
Great FOTM.
And he I remember he said to me, he said, Jeff, I'm really sorry. We're working late tonight. I said, dude, this is huge. I mean, of course,
massive.
This is a huge deal. He's being
Peter
traded.
Pocklington.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
but those were some really talented people I work with, and you're working with great gear. I love anything audio gear, and these Nagra tape decks and these fancy boards and the great microphones.
But was there ever an opportunity for Jeff Chalmers to be on the air at CBC Radio?
I did give a tape to somebody at one time who I had expressed interest with in getting on the air at CBC, and I don't think it really went anywhere. I wasn't too serious about it, but I got back onto Q, and I was doing both for quite a while, CBC Radio and Q107. I don't think either knew about it.
What year are we talking about? That because now that CBC is finding out,
86-ish.
Okay, so I didn't know you snuck back into Q,
Yeah,
because then you have like 4 tours of duty. Because I'm doing some math here, because I do want to play a clip. I want to shout out Captain Phil Evans.
Okay.
You know Captain Phil?
Captain Phil, I know the name, yes.
Okay.
Captain Phil, yeah.
Captain Phil, he's been archiving some stuff.
Okay.
And he archived. So I'm going to play this, and then I'll get a couple more clips too. But here's the one I want.
Hey, Toronto. This is Steven Tyler from Aerosmith, and we be backstage at CNE Stadium getting ready to rock your cruisers off. And what's this I hear? There's a new hog in town. AM 640, the hog. Tune him in and slam the ham, baby.
Here come the hog. AM 640.
Good afternoon, Toronto. This is what rock and roll radio is
Randy
all
Tiller.
about. 5:06 on the drive home. It's a long weekend. This is Hard from the Hog.
So that is the official launch of the Hog 640.
Yeah, 10254 Yonge Street was in a building on the west side of Yonge Street, beg your pardon, above a drugstore. The quintessential 1940s, cinder block, very boring building, metal fire escape. And it was CFGM for a long time, and the sales department, the offices were downstairs, and the studios were upstairs. And I was hired in June of 1990 by Gary Obie, the Magic Christian, who was a great program director. I was hired as a swing jock, and that was a really interesting experiment. I know that the station wanted to come down to Young and Bloor, and I think Don Schaefer was the general manager at the time, and that station, I believe, CHOG AM, was licensed to sort of serve the York region up that way, and the CRTC
interesting.
wouldn't allow the station to come down to Yonge and Bloor, to Bloor Street East. So ultimately, Q moved north and the Hog moved south, and they built a station at 5255 Yonge Street.
Is that Young and Norton?
Young Norton Center.
Because there's still a Jesse and Jean Way.
Yes, there is, right there. Yes, I worked with Jesse and Jean at that particular. That was a beautiful station, 2 floors. I mean, it was beautifully. They hired this firm to come in and to design the station, and it was just, the aesthetic was gorgeous, beautiful gear, state of the art stuff, a lot of DAT machines, whatever happened to that format. But it was really cool. That was a really good experience. Yeah. So I was working at, because AM 640, the Hog became AM 640, the new beat of Toronto, which was sort of the CHR.
Tarzan Dan and
was
Jesse
there.
and Jean again.
Jesse and Jean ended up doing the morning show.
Well, because CFTR went all news,
That's
and
right.
they literally that day, I think,
That's right.
signed on with 640.
Yeah. So, but it was interesting because, I guess the whole philosophy was, as Gary Obie once quoted, it was sort of go to Hog High and graduate to QU.
Right.
And unfortunately, the format just didn't resonate with a lot of people. And, in 1990, music on AM, it's sort of,
Is the end of times for
Yeah.
music,
Yeah, it really was.
except for maybe greatest hits, like golden oldies.
But it was interesting because it was they had Al Kingdon was doing news, and he had this beautiful commanding voice, and it was sort of reminiscent of CKLW back in the radio heyday, with this sensational yellow journalism.
That's
if you will.
the Big Eight, right?
Yeah. And so it was interesting that way.
Oh, but now that you mentioned the Big Eight, I'm actually contractually obligated to play this right here.
The following program contains adult themes, nudity, and coarse language. Viewer and parental discretion is advised.
Mark Daly,
the voice.
I worked with Mark Daly. There was a restaurateur I worked with named of Mike Quinn, and Mike Quinn was had a successful restaurant, a family business at Danforth and Jones back in the 80s. And they sold a lot of beer and a lot of wings. I got a job in 85 while I was working at Q and CBC Radio, DJing at this place. Jeez. And years later, Mike Quinn got hurt in Mexico and didn't have insurance. And they had to raise money to fly him back. Actually, he'd flown back, and they had to raise money to cover the cost, the exorbitant cost of him flying back to Toronto. Right. And so they held a charity event at the Balmy Beach Club in Toronto. And I was contacted by somebody, and they said, we want you to co-host this fundraiser. I said, Mike was a great guy. He was really fair with me, and I'm a big fan of the guy personally. And I said, well, by the way, who's the other host? He said, it's Mark Daly. I thought, oh my God, I'm going to be co-hosting with this guy, with this beautiful big voice and this really tall. He was so cool. He was so beautiful. What a beautiful soul. I just met the guy.
Right.
I just met him, and we had this job to do, but he cut through all that. Yeah. You talk about connections.
Yeah.
I connected with the guy immediately. He had that quality about him. And he had this talent. I mean, we all think of City TV, Channel 79. We think of Mark Daly. It was great. The intros and the movie intros and the news intros and the news, hosting.
Oh my God, 100%. I also, when I think of City TV, I think of John Gallagher doing sports. So is now an appropriate time. So your Q107 visits, I didn't even know there was one like between you were at Q107. Just trying to get all my Q107s right. You come back in 93. So do you leave the Hog to come back to Q107?
Yes, I was at the new beat of Toronto. I was at AM 640, so I was in the same building now. See, because Q was, now they'd come.
Is that WIC?
Yeah, it was still WIC, Western International Communications, right? So it was Q and 640 together at 5255 Yonge, and I was doing, swing at AM 640, and then Scruff had come into
the Scruff comeback.
TJ Connors alluded to that, and he didn't know the dates. I know the dates.
Okay, I'm listening.
He was unsure of the dates because he was a kid at the time. I've known TJ most of his life, and Scruff had been on the air for a couple of months, I guess, and now I was in the building. I'd known Scruff from years past at Q, and they had Scruff doing the morning show as host, John Gallagher doing sports, Donna Saker doing traffic.
This is the crew.
This is the classic lineup. Although Mark Hebscher came in later, and Mark's amazing, and that was a different time with Jake later. We'll talk about that. Anyway, so I guess they said the guy they had producing the morning show, they wanted to make a change, and they said, "Do you want to come on and do it?" I said, "I will come on and do it." But I want to be part of the show.
Right.
I've been on the air now for a while. All respect, but I want to be on part of the show. I want to talk.
Right.
So they agreed to that, and so that was fine. And Danny Kingsbury, who
just made his Toronto.
I just saw Danny out in Renfrew, out in the Ottawa Valley. Amazing. Danny's great.
Right.
Danny was at
and the man who's responsible for putting Humble and Fred together.
Yeah, Danny was at my wedding. He was great. I still have the candlesticks, Danny. So thank you very much. I just saw them. I just cleaned out my cabinet and saw them and thought of you.
Well, that's shout out to Jeff Lumby too.
Yeah, Jeff's great and really funny guy. Good broadcaster. 185. I was in Hamilton for a while. We'll talk about that. But Scruff was okay. This was sort of think about this now. Scruff was really successful in Winnipeg. He had come to CFTR in '77. He was hired to do swing at TR in '77. There was talk about him taking over the morning show, and when Brady left, that never happened. And Scruff ended up at Q107 doing the morning show. Was making pretty good money. In fact, he was one of the higher paid broadcasters at that time in 1980, in excess of $100,000, which was quite a bit of money back then.
Sure.
It's certainly elevated since then. But he was sort of, I want to say past his prime, but he didn't have the same work ethic, I'll say, as he might have had in his earlier years. And that kind of showed on the air. He wasn't as, we've lost Scruff. I don't want to speak ill of the man. He was.
No, but you might have to start the show without Scruff Connors. Right?
He ultimately moved to St. Catharines because he worked at Hits for a while. But Scruff had been to WYSP in Philadelphia. He'd been to another American FM station and then came back to Q after he left in the early 80s. So he'd been around a bit, and he was just a little tired, I think, at that point. And it wasn't really working on the morning show. It just wasn't happening for him. And thankfully with Donna and Gallagher, who, they didn't carry the show, but they were a big part of the show.
They picked up the slack.
They picked up this, exactly, right. Mike, exactly.
Right.
So it was, and I was producing. It was very exciting. We're in this beautiful new facility, great view of the city. We're in pre-amalgamation in North York. Mel Lassman was the mayor, right. And it was a time that it was time for him to go. So Danny, I guess, orchestrated Jake to come back.
Brother Jake Edwards,
who is a legend, also had worked with Jake in '85 at Q107. Sure. He was doing the morning show. There was a while at Q107. There were three morning people.
Yeah,
it was Scruff Connors, Jesse and Gene, and Jake Edwards.
Take it
forever. Okay,
right.
So after Bob Say before Scruff at I think Wallishin did the morning show. Ted Wallishin.
Yeah, Ted Wallishin.
Great guy. Yeah. Ted Wallishin, Bob Say, then Scruff. But then it was just Jesse and Gene, Scruff or Jake until Stern. Right. And then things changed from there. But that was a long tenure. So Jake came in '94. So Scruff was there for about a year. And then Jake came in at '94. And we were doing the radio show. And I became very, very close with Jake Edwards. We hung out a lot together. He had a place in a condo in the city because it was just too far to commute from Collingwood, where his wife and young children at the time were living. And so during the weeks, Jake would be in the city, and I had a house in Scarborough and Gilwood, very close to Wired City Cable, and right. And we hung out a lot. We hung out a lot together, he and I personally, outside of work, and we had a great time.
And you hit him in the solar plexus.
Oh, he was so fun.
And he went for it.
No, we laughed. We laughed a lot, and we're still in touch today. So it's good. That's the thing about radio. You pick up people along the way.
Right.
It's like any. Well, maybe not like any job, but you pick people up along the way. I'm going to just shout out 3 people.
Yeah.
You pick up not only do you pick up staff, people you work with, but also listeners. It's all about the listener. That's why you're there, is for the listener. And I want to shout out, I won't use their last names, but Steve and Libby and Sue are 3 listeners with whom I'm still in touch in 2024. These listeners are from 1979.
Wow.
Who used to call me in Oshawa when I was doing evenings at CKAR.
Wow.
And they're still in touch.
And they're calling you on Boom.
Dude,
now.
that's 45 years ago. And they're Facebook friends, they're social media friends. They call the radio station.
Wow.
I was playing April Wine. It was our Canada Day thing last night yesterday on Boom 97.3. Yeah. And played April Wine. And there's Steve. Is his favorite band.
Amazing.
And so there's a guy from 45 years ago. This is what it's all about. Okay. This is what it's all about. You're there to make the connection with listeners. And when you make that connection with somebody, it's magic. And
you made that connection with Brother Jake Edwards. I know Brother Jake close with Gene Velitis as well. They had a show in Vancouver.
That's right.
Until fairly recently.
Yep.
But now I need to play the John Gallagher clip, which is the reason I reached out to you. I'm like, why haven't I had Jeff Chalmers on the show? Yeah. And then I heard him drop your name in this clip, which you're going to hear in the headphones right now.
Okay.
And then at the end of this, we're going to find out, is John Gallagher full of shit? Are Humble and Fred wrong? Look me in the eyes. You got beautiful eyes. You're going to be 100% honest with me after this clip. You're going to be 100% honest with me.
I know what the clip is. I know what the answer is.
Here we go.
Oh. And I'm okay. So it's 1990, and I'm having lunch at the Molson Indy with. Let me tell you another story about the Molson Indy and how Labatt paid everyone at Q107 $20,000. Paola lives, and I'll tell you the story real quick.
Yeah.
$20,000, not to mention Molson for an entire year. Toronto Indy? Nah.
Wait, John.
Molson.
Labatt's gave you personally 20,000 Canadian dollars if you promise not to say the word Molson's for 1 calendar year.
Yes.
Wow.
And
Okay,
along
keep
with
going.
Jeff Connors and Donna Saker and Jeff Chalmers on the $20,000 on the barrel's head. Oh, no.
All right, Jeff, I've been waiting months for this here.
I don't know, man.
Okay, what do you have to say about that clip I just played from John Gallagher?
I wasn't at Q. Well, I wasn't at Q in 1990. I was there in the mid 90s on the morning show with John. 93 to 96 was my tenure at that time, and it seems to me that was the Molson Indie back then.
Yeah, it was definitely the Molson Indie.
And we used to go down there. We had some boxes at times. We'd go down there and have a little race action and enjoy the day and stuff. But that's.
You're calling bullshit on that story.
I didn't
just like Humble and Fred did.
I'll just say I didn't receive.
You didn't receive
any money.
Okay, because he's specific. That's why you're on the show. I mean, I got to reach out to find Donna Saker. I think she's in Ottawa. I got to track her down.
Montreal, I believe.
Montreal. Okay, I got to track her down. But he sort of name checks. Obviously, I can't check with Scruff if he got $20,000. But John claims he got $20,000 for 1 year. They wouldn't even call it the Molson Indie. They'd have to call it the Toronto Indie because they couldn't say the word Molson on the air. But no one approached you with this, and no one gave you a penny. No one from Labatt's approached you to make some kind of a payola deal that John describes.
The stuff that John talks about, that's not the way I remember it.
Okay, thank you, Jeff, for coming by. I'll play you out now. All right. Okay, no, because my mind was blown by this, and I was chatting. So after I go on the Humble and Fred show for like 5-10 minutes once a week, and then we have a private Zoom where we talk about all the stuff as producer or whatever. And I told them the story, and they said basically bullshit. Never happened.
Right.
And I'm like, well, he dropped names of people who also received the $20,000, and I can track one or more down. You were my first thought. I think I went to LinkedIn. I found you. I said, Hey, Jeff, we got to get you over here. So thank you. Okay. I think you were clear that this didn't happen to you. So if it happened, it was you weren't part of that.
Yeah, John's a great guy. Sorry, I've been playing with my camera here.
Oh, yeah, what are you doing over there?
No,
You're
sorry,
bored?
my SD card's full.
I saw
ridiculous.
That.
And so I want to record.
Luckily,
some
I
of this.
did record this for you if you want the file.
Oh, really? This is crazy. I don't know why I'd be so ill-prepared. I should have cleared the card beforehand. But anyway, not to. I mean, John's a great guy.
Well,
I've known John since
maybe he's misremembering.
87.
But how do you misremember $20,000?
I don't know, man.
Okay, I'll work this out with John.
All right.
He's embellished. You should hear the number of women he claims he has bedded. I did the math, and he would have no time to be on the radio, let alone on City TV, because he's at nights he's doing sports on City TV,
right.
And then he's on the morning show.
Yeah.
There's not enough time to bed all these women.
Right.
I did the math. Okay, who is he? Dr. J here. Okay, all right. So I need to get so just so people know, Q107 93. But you do go off to Ottawa for a little bit, but then you come back to Q107.
Yes, it was crazy. Ottawa, Rob Farina, who's a great guy.
Who's an FOTM.
Yeah, nice guy, really talented guy. He found great success. He'd gone, I believe, from CFTR out to Winnipeg and really made a name for himself. Became a successful programmer,
right.
And ultimately ended up in Ottawa working for Rogers and. We all got let go, did the morning show at Q107 in August of 96.
Wait, is this the Howard Stern?
No, this is before that.
Before Howard Stern.
I believe they brought Jesse and Jean back. I mean, it was this circle. It was crazy.
And if I am correct, Mike, it's funny that I mentioned everything connects, right? But Mike Richards will be my co-host on Sunday live from Christie Pitts. And I'm pretty sure Jeff Lumby and Mike Richards were part of a morning show that were going to be the Q107 morning show. And then Jesse and Jean struck some deal.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure there's a story that I was told by Mike Richards and Jeff Lumby, I'll confirm this on Sunday, where they're literally at like a barbecue to celebrate that they're the new Q107 morning show. And they get a phone call from whoever's in charge of WIC. Basically saying like, no, Jesse and Jean are coming back, like the deal's off. Danny,
of course, had an association with Jeff Lumby from Hamilton from 195.
Yeah, and from way before that, from Moose Jaw.
Right. Anyway, I heard the same thing, that this was going to be the new morning show.
Yeah.
And so anyway, we all got let go. This is what radio is all about. We all got fired.
Right.
I've been fired.
Welcome to radio.
I've been fired from most of my radio jobs.
Right.
This is part
like
of
Dr. Johnny Fever, right?
It's incredible, up and down the dial.
Although
right?
you get most of your stuff is in the same market, which is
This is a really fortunate thing for me that I haven't had to stray too far from.
But you went all the way to Ottawa.
All the way to Ottawa. I was born in Ottawa, so it wasn't really that much of a stretch. I knew
Right.
I have family on both sides in Ottawa. I was born there. I hadn't ever worked in Ottawa, but Farina called me and said, "Well, we have this opportunity to do afternoon drive in Ottawa for this Rogers property."
Right.
I said, "Wow, cool. I need some work.
Yeah.
What's the format?" So it's country. I thought, "Oh, country."
Yeehaw.
But you know what? At the time, I mean, it was, and this was a station, CKBY in Ottawa, which had traditionally been a country and western twanger, serving the Ottawa Valley, very conservative market. And now it was 1996, and it was all about Garth and Shania and Clint Black and
Right.
Dwight Yoakam and all these hat acts who were producing really contemporary, upbeat, slick country music. And the station had jingles and music beds and was really tight and was number one in the market in Ottawa. It was huge. And so I stepped into this role doing afternoon drive 2 to 7, moved there, and quickly found out, I don't know why it was so lost on me, that the Ottawa Valley is really conservative. And they didn't like my shtick at all.
That might work in the big smoke.
Exactly. People used to call them and say, "You can't say that on the radio." I thought, what's wrong with you people? And they had a comment line where people could call in, listeners could call into the radio station and leave their comments. And it got to the point where I would open my show with these comments because they were so hysterical. "I hope Jeff takes a long walk off a short pier. Why doesn't Jeff Chalmers go back to that rock station he came from?"
Right.
All these comments were coming in. I was crappy. It was lousy. Farina had left for the Chum station. I was sitting there doing drive. We had no PD. The music director was the program director. They brought a guy in from Victoria. He didn't like me. I ended up getting fired on the Monday in early January. And I called Pat Cardinal at Q107, and I was on the air on Saturday.
Wow.
He said, "How many shifts do you want?" I said, "I'll take 5. So I had 3 all-nighters and 2 weekends. And so 98, I'm back at Q107, and it was great. I was getting married in 6 months. I missed Toronto greatly. I mean, Ottawa, once you're in Toronto, there's such a buzz. There's so much happening in TO. I'm from here. I grew up here. I worked in radio here. I know the city intimately. I know the market. Ottawa was sleepy. It was small. It was dull. It was conservative.
Government town.
It was really conservative.
Right.
And so coming back to Toronto, I'll do all nights. All night's great. All night's is amazing. So I was at Q107 from 98 until 2000 under Pat Cardinal, who was a great program director. I know a lot of people have a lot of respect for Pat. He was a great guy. We've lost Pat as well, but he was really good to me. And he used to come in. It was really weird how he used to come in to the control room. It's unusual, really, for the program director to sit with you during your show. It's kind of intimidating. Here's your boss, and he's like, "What are you air checking me? Are you?"
Right, that's why I stumbled on the intro. I had Jeff Chalmers beside me.
Right,
Sure.
right. 15-13, buddy. I mean, so it was great. So that was really cool. And then, of course, that as it would go, in 2000, then fired. They made some changes, and they were saving some money. So I got fired. So that was
You got fired from the New Country station, which was like their KISS, I guess, CISS that we had on this break. Shout out to Sharon Taylor, by the way, who was the last PD at 680 CFTR before it went all news, and then she did work at
she's
KISS
great
as well.
Yeah.
All right, now I need to ask you about a former morning show host at Q107 and what your relationship was like with John Derringer.
Yeah, John. I met John in the fall of 86, I believe. He came to Q107 for the first time. He was also an operator at CFTR.
Right.
And it was really interesting because when
his brother was at CFTR.
I used to op for his brother.
Bill Hayes, FOTM Bill Hayes.
I operated Bill Hayes' first.
Sweetheart, by the way.
Yeah, nice guy. I operated Bill Hayes' first radio show at CFTR. Yeah, his very first show. And a lot of people came through CFTR. It was fun. But Bill is the older brother, I believe. And,
so John Hayes is like an op at CFTR, and
now
becomes John Derringer on Q107.
Yeah, and he was, when he first got to Q, I thought, wow, this guy's good, man. He's, I think he came from Edmonton, and a lot of us were thinking sort of, wow, this guy's really good. He's, he's got this really interesting way of communicating. He's quite slick, and he's really confident, and he was I guess ultimately did the afternoon drive show at Q107 when I was there.
Yeah, because when does Stern exit Q107? Is that because you show up? You're there. It's late 90s, no?
Yeah, late 90s.
So you were there for that, right?
I left in January of 2000.
Okay,
and I believe Stern was doing the morning show on the morning show.
Oh, he was still there. Okay,
yeah.
All right, very interesting. So I got to ask you, like, did you know about John's reputation with the female co-hosts?
I think it was a sort of a known thing. I think people knew.
Well, Humble and Fred knew, and they were down the hall, I guess, at whenever CFNY and Q107 joined.
Right, they were at the Eaton Center together, I believe.
Right. So I know. They had, Colleen Rushholm, who recently retired, was eventually speaking of Stu Jeffries. So Colleen and Stu were co-hosts, and then Humble Howard and Colleen. And Colleen is one of the many people who had been, I guess, harassed,
right,
verbally. I don't know what the terminology is, because nothing criminal happened, as far as I know. This is like verbal assault of some non-criminal nature.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Yeah. I never know how to describe it. It's like verbal abuse.
But no one said anything. That's the thing. No one.
Well, he was the cash cow, right? So I feel like there was a sense, at least Humble and Fred feel there was a sense of like, don't fuck with the golden goose, because he generated revenue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, he had huge numbers, right? He was popular. So
like if it's going to be, Jackie Delaney goes or John Derringer goes, Jackie's going because John Derringer, generated revenue. But then, so now, obviously now he's off the air, I guess, but it took Jennifer Valentine's video before there was any change.
Isn't that interesting how that worked? She had the confidence to post a video without naming anybody, and it certainly got the desired result, didn't it?
Yeah, and then Maureen Holloway came out and started, talking about what she experienced, kind of like have sort of Jennifer's back on that, and Andrea Ruse, and the list goes on. That's 5 women right there we've talked about.
I know all these women. Yes, I know these women.
All right, so you haven't heard from John in a while. I asked Gallagher, who was pretty tight with John, and he says, no, John doesn't return his texts or anything. But John Derringer seems to have disappeared. Like, there's no sightings of John Derringer.
Yeah, I don't know what he's doing. He wasn't a personal friend of mine. I just work with him professionally. But
all right, so there you go. Now you've let's see. Now you've satisfied all the John Derringer questions that came pummeling in when they heard Jeff Chalmers was coming on. But you end up at Hamilton, so at Y95, and then it becomes Y108.
This is how. Do you want to know how cool Pat Cardinal was?
Yeah.
He got the word, okay, we got to cut some, whatever the edict was, get rid of Chalmers. So Pat said, Jeff, we have to meet. And so I was living at the time in Mississauga with my wife in our first house, and we met at a local coffee shop. And of course Pat showed up with the envelope. There's always the envelope, right? There's always that envelope. You know what's in it.
Yeah,
I've seen a lot of these envelopes. We all have, right?
But nowadays it's gonna be him plus an HR person.
Yeah. Well, I've seen that too. And in Hamilton, we'll talk about that with when Wick.
Because that's another great Mike Richards story.
Oh my God,
with Lumbee.
No, it was unbelievable. They had a cop in the cafeteria after the exodus with the Wick people getting let go. Anyway,
okay, we got to get that story ASAP. By the way, you've been amazing. So we're I see here we've gone like 90 minutes or whatever. So we're
really?
So please,
we have
please.
To go.
No, it's not that I have to go, because I would never want to rush greatness like this, Jeff. Please. But okay, so tell me a little bit about Y95/Y108, but particularly the firing.
Just quickly to finish up the Pat Cardinal.
Yeah, sorry.
He shows up. And he said, do you want anything? Do you want like cigarettes? He bought me a pack of cigarettes.
Okay.
Which I thought was, odd.
The least he could do.
He bought me a pack of cigarettes, and he drove to Mississauga to hand me my walking papers. But then he made calls for me to try and find me a gig. And he called Mark Foreman, who was the program director at the time for WIC at Y95 in Hamilton before it changed to Y108.
Right.
And I got a gig doing swing there, and that was
nice.
really cool. So, and again, just down the highway, not far, to still stay.
Hamilton, sure.
And great people, excellent people in Hamilton, wonderful radio market, saw some really cool bands, great art scene, James Street North, Tom Wilson, Teenage Head. I mean, just a great market.
By the way, these drumsticks I've been picking up, and I find it fun to just pick them up. They're Teenage Head drumsticks. Gene Champagne gave them to me.
Wow, those are cool.
And there's the Junk House vinyl.
That's the anniversary edition, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I can't play it, but I like having it in the studio.
I met Tom Wilson at Larry's Hideaway back in the early 80s when he was still Tom Wilson in the Florida Razors, and he gave me a 45. And years later, when he was with Junk House, with Sony, I believe, was the label at the time, and I had an interview with him, and I took that single with me, and he autographed it for me.
Love that man.
He's great. And I had a milestone birthday back in December of 2023, and Junk House was playing at the Horseshoe.
I was there that night.
And I said, I'm going.
Yeah.
It was incredible. It was amazing.
A member of the band passed away since then.
I didn't know that.
Rusty Wilson.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
But I was at that show.
I took the GoPro. I took the GoPro to that show, and there it is.
Okay.
Right? Tom Wilson.
Wow.
Amazing. So Hamilton was a great experience. It was really
this is this is the station with Lumbee and Mike Richards working together in the mornings, right?
They had left by then.
It
was Scott Thompson and Lori Love doing the morning show.
Who just retired herself.
Right. Everybody's retiring except for other people.
Sometimes you retire and sometimes you're retired.
Yes, true. But it was Jeremy Smith was doing middays. It was Todd Lewis, who was the general manager's son, was doing the afternoon drive show.
Oh.
And I forget who was doing the evening show at the time, but
cool.
It was a good experience.
So why does this Hamilton experience come to an end?
I wanted to get back into Toronto. And I had heard that 92.5 Jack FM, which had at the time been announcerless, was going to bring announcers back to the into the mix. So I called the radio station, talked to the music director, and found out who the PD was going to be. And I contacted the PD, who was in Calgary, because Jack FM had found great success in Calgary with that sort of mixed genre format.
We play what we want kind of deal, right?
Which worked there. And ultimately did not work in Toronto, oddly.
But
because
it doesn't always translate over.
Well, it's funny, what's interesting is that Boom 97.3 also plays a mix of genres, but it's so cleverly programmed. It's very scientific, right? You're going to get a rock song, a new wave song, a disco song, a classic song. It's very scientifically programmed. The songs are very researched. It's got a very Toronto sound as Boom 97.3. I found Jack
Echo
FM.
Beach.
Yeah, Echo Beach. Don't walk on past. Well, that too, Dionne Warwick. I'm thinking of Blue Peter.
Butchering my Blue Peter song.
Okay.
Don't walk past. Yeah, absolutely.
But anyway, so
Martha and the Muffins.
Those great bands, of course. Anyway, so it was a matter of applying to this radio station, and I got a gig. The program director was Steve Kennedy. He came into Toronto. We met in Brampton, where I was living at the time and still live, as a matter of fact, 19 years. And he offered me a job doing middays. So I left after 7 years at Chorus Hamilton.
Yeah.
I'm back in Toronto with Rogers, my third tenure at Rogers, and it's middays at Jack FM.
Okay, now I know there's a stop before I want to get you to Boom here and spend a little time on Boom before we say goodbye. Now, before you get to Boom, there's the Canadian Traffic Network.
Oh yeah. That was really interesting because you're working. It's really weird. Because traditionally in a radio station, like your gorgeous little studio down here, you're sitting there isolated by yourself,
right?
And you have full control. This is why I love what I do, because I can go to the studio today and there's no one there. I have full control. I can control the volume of the music. I have the door closed. No one comes in and bothers me. The phones are there. There's a text platform. I choose when to access all these things. I have full control.
Yeah.
At the Canadian Traffic Network, I got a gig, and its facility is in the old aircraft control tower at Buttonville Airport.
Okay.
Right at 404 and Major Mac, I guess it is.
Wait, but it's gone now, right?
Is it?
I feel like Buttonville's gone. My only time in a little plane in my life was Humble Howard co-owned a Cessna, like a little airplane that was at Buttonville, and I went to Buttonville and flew with him. That was my one and only time in a small plane.
Yeah, no, it's terrifying, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, especially when your life is in the hands of Humble Howard. You're like, you're a radio guy.
Right.
Don't crash.
Do you have a license? Bruce Dickinson. We had we had an opportunity to I had this opportunity to work in this facility, but you had workstations in the tower whereby there were like 6, 8, 9 people.
Yeah.
And they're all broadcasting at the same time. And you had these little dividers.
Any other names we might know who would be in this facility giving traffic? So stations with what would subscribe?
So you'd feed. Yeah. They'd subscribe to the service.
Do you know what stations would you appear on as a part of the Canadian?
I was on CFRB in Toronto, 1010. Yeah, I'm trying to think of. I think Q107 was a client for a long time. 640. So it was Chorus. There was a station in Ottawa that was subscribing. So here we are doing traffic. And you're figuring out by looking at Google Maps traffic,
right?
And talking about.
But luckily, you speak Ottawa because
it was
you
there.
were there.
Yeah.
Okay, so please tell me how you get to Boom. Like, I think Boom is a very cool station, and I know it does very well. In fact, I've noticed myself, just anecdotally, the Q107 playlist has changed because of the success of Boom. Like Duran Duran, for example. Like, I feel like Duran Duran would never be played on Q107, but Boom would play Duran Duran.
Oh, yeah.
And then the success of Boom, I call it the boomification of Q, where they need to kind of modify their playlist to appeal to Boom listeners. But how did you end up at Boom?
I had a food truck. After I left the Canadian Traffic Network, I heard
about the food truck. I heard that you had a food truck business.
I had a food truck, Chrome on the Range.
Okay.
Chrome on the Range was plying the streets of Peel, and I had a lot of corporate contracts. This is when the food trucks were big and popular. And what I found really gratifying about operating a food truck, which is a lot of work, by the way, and oftentimes not a lot of money, which is fine, but it's the social interaction. It's not unlike radio because you're providing a service and people are coming to you and they're excited. People are excited about street food, and it's up to you as the boss to figure out, what's the venue? Who's coming to the venue? What are you going to be serving? What's the weather forecast like? What are your food costs?
Right.
What are your other costs? Are your inspections up to date? Are your licenses up to date? There's a lot of things to talk. There are a lot of things to consider. It's a lot of fun. It's very social, and you have these really cool interactions with people that could last for 30 seconds while they order a pop, or maybe 6, 8, 10 minutes while they order a burger.
Right.
And you have this thing with them, and they're sitting there, standing in front of you.
That's cool.
Either playing with their phone or talking to you. And so I really, really enjoyed that. But there was an ad somewhere. I guess my wife saw it on Milkman or something and said, hey, Boom's looking for somebody. I was rushing out of the house one day. Yeah. This is how it happens sometimes.
Yeah.
You can sit there and pour over your old air checks and doctor them and get everything all fancy. I said, for crying out loud, okay, fine. Threw a tape together.
Yeah.
Threw it together.
Yeah.
Sent it off. And I'm serving drinks at Lakeside Garden Gallery in the food truck set up one spring 10 years ago. And it was the radio station calling and said, we got your tape. Would you like to come in and talk about it?
Who called you?
Troy McCollum was the assistant program
director.
Yes,
of course.
At the time.
Right. I know his name.
Steve Parsons was my boss in Oshawa, my program director. I'm sorry, in Hamilton.
In Hamilton.
And
when you've been as many places as you're going to confuse a few spots.
I am confused right now, as a matter of fact. But I do know this is episode 15,
You were confused,
13.
by the way, of where Buttonville was. I just need to clarify. So Hayref on the live stream says it was 404 and 16th, not Major Mac.
Okay,
so close but no cigar.
All right.
And absolutely confirmed, and I did read about this, that they're currently bulldozing it. It is gone. Buttonville is gone.
Well, it was ancient. I mean, it was this sort of these turquoise 1950s, towers with this angled glass. It was crazy. And there were 9 people talking at the same time.
Wow.
You had to
So
focus
I think
on-
I asked you, was there anyone else of those 9 people here? And then we're going to talk Boom for the rest of the run here.
Lisa Edwards who was there.
Does anyone change their name for different stations? Like I heard of this move. I want to say Colleen Rushell maybe, or somebody, Maureen Holloway, someone was telling me a story. Like on one station they had one name and on the other station they had a different name. None of that going on. You're always yourself.
I never did that.
You're Jeff Chalmers.
I always use my real name always.
Okay. But very cool. So you get the call. It's who you know, of course, Jeff Chalmers, and you made all these great connections, like you said, and they've seemed to have come in handy here. And you get back to Boom, and this is about 10 years ago. And when can we hear you on Boom?
Weekends, 3:00.
Or Canada Day?
Or in Canada, do all the legal holidays. I filled in. I'm working tonight, for example, and I'm working. Filling in a couple of days.
Who are you
this
filling
week.
in for
I'm
tonight?
Filling in for Matt Story tonight, 7:00.
Okay, one of the few Boomers who hasn't been on Boomers.
Yeah,
who hasn't been on, because I want to shout out KJ from your CFTR days, right?
Chris James is amazing, and you talk about the art of disc jockeying, of being a radio on air host. That guy. Right, this guy.
He's good on the air, but not a great podcast guest because he doesn't really like talking about himself.
He's very humble, and he's a throwback.
Yeah.
If I come across a cool air check from somebody from the 70s on AM radio in the U.S. somewhere, I'll play it for him, and he'll get it.
Yes.
He loves the art of broadcasting, and he still has that old school. If you listen to him, the way this is the whole thing about radio broadcasting. When you're talking over music, you have this opportunity to fill the gap over the intro of a song. What are you going to put in there? What are you going to say, and how are you going to say it? You might have 4 seconds. You might have 40 seconds. That's your job, is to fill that void.
And there's no safety net, right? Like you're live to air.
Yep.
There is no, you're not going to fix it in post. This is happening live. And if you screw up, you screw up. And that's exciting.
It's really exciting.
Yeah.
And I'm so excited about it. After all these years, it's been, I was first on the air in 79. It's now 2024. I still get excited to go to work.
I can hear it in your voice.
Well,
you love radio.
It's great. I mean, the music sounds, when you're sitting there with the Sony 7506s on, listening to the stereo feed from the on-air feed from the board, and you're hearing these classic songs in your cans.
Yeah.
Nothing sounds better. And you got something that's really slickly produced, like Michael Jackson, Quincy Jones.
Oh, sure. It's like that's practically yacht rock there. Yeah.
You're about to talk over the intro. Oh man, it's your responsibility. It's a huge responsibility. You are the last part of this equation. It's a huge responsibility that you're given, and you better not mess it up. You better be prepared.
Don't mess it up, Jeff Chalmers. I'm thinking now Toto, like you're kicking out a Toto song or something. But do you have a favorite song that you get to talk up and listen to when you're on the air too?
That's a good one. I'm not sure about that. A favorite song. I mean,
like this is my favorite Boom song.
Wow, that's a really tough one.
On that one?
Well, I would, it's a mix of 70s, 80s, 90s. So it's interesting. Is a lot of these songs.
Any Ultravox? You gonna kick out any Ultravox?
Midjour, Sleepwalk.
Or Vienna, maybe. I bet you Vienna gets played.
But I'll tell you something though. Anytime I get to play Blue Peter on Boom 97.3, I get excited.
Okay, Chris Wardman again. FOTM, Chris Wardman. Maypots. I just want to shout out Maypots, an early guest on this program. It was because I listened to her on CFNY.
Yeah,
and I loved Maypots. I still love Maypots' voice, and
she's great on the air.
Yeah, so I'm thinking, Boom. You have your Stu Jeffries we shouted out earlier. You got your Maypots. You got your KJ. You got your Jeff Chalmers. This is where it's at, buddy. This is it.
These are all veteran announcers. These are all people, and it's interesting because all these jocks are in their 50s or 60s. And I had a conversation with Steve Parsons, the general manager, who's now the president, I believe. President? No, I might get that wrong. We should check that.
We'll fix that in post.
Right. Can you?
No. Can I is a different question than will I?
Right. Anyway, I was in his office. I was in his office recently, and I said, I can't believe we're still doing this. I can't believe we still have live radio DJs in 2024. It's quite something.
Because on The Simpsons, we saw the DJ 2000 was coming, right? And how about those clowns in Congress? So that is now my next question. I want to close with you is how long will you run? What is the future? Like, will you hang on as long as there's a terrestrial signal that will air a live local voice like yours? Because that is what I want to point out. When you have a live and local voice, it's like, oh yeah, that's radio. But it's not as common as it used to be. Like there's fewer and fewer live and local voices on the radio. This is just a love it all you want, but it is a I won't call it a sunsetting industry like Alan Cross, but you could argue that it is a shrinking industry and eventually will morph into something else. How long will you run Jeff Chalmers?
As long as they'll have me.
As long as they'll have you.
As long as they'll have me. It's. I was talking to May Potts about this, and she was talking about her voice.
Yeah.
And now she still has her voice.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, right? How's your voice? Yeah. She doesn't sound old.
No.
I mean, she's not old, but she doesn't sound old. So for me personally, I'll go as long as I can, man. As long as they'll have me, I'm there.
And how was this Toronto Mike debut?
This was fantastic. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come in and meet you and see the studio and for the lovely parting gifts.
You play any Lowest of the Low on Boom?
Another favorite band. Not a lot, but good can come.
I feel like Bleed a Little While Tonight would be
one of my favorite songs. Love the local reference.
Oh yeah, well,
Kissing on Bathurst Street.
Absolutely, and there's a lot. I mean, you've got a song called Under the Carlaw Bridge. You got a lot of local references. The Only Cafe has a song about it, as I recall. And this song right here, we'll take the streetcar downtown. Read Henry Miller.
It's a great tune.
Dude, this was a great conversation. I love talking. I think I'm the last guy left who wants to give somebody 90 minutes plus to talk radio, and I loved it so much.
Thank you so much, Mike.
And shout out to Chalk Circle. Every April 1st, I gotta go on Twitter and share the link to the video for April Fool. Love those guys. Love FOTM Jeff Chalmers. We'll take a picture by the tree, but don't leave without your lasagna. Make sure you get your beer. You got your books. You got your measuring tape. And that brings us to the end of our 1,513th show.
Wow.
How can we follow you on social? Like, which social media presence do you maintain?
I'm on Facebook at Jeff Chalmers. I'm on Instagram at Positive Alacrity. And I've launched a new project whereby I'm recording seniors. I'm recording legacies. I'm recording family stories for the future, for future listens for families. And that is...
I'm right in on that.
alittleaboutme.ca on Instagram. A little about me.
I love that idea. I love it. You can, how many people, I wish I had a conversation with my grandfather I could listen to right now.
Nobody wants Granny's hutch. Nobody wants Granny's silverware. What we do want are the stories before it's too late. I can capture those stories.
What was that website again?
alittleaboutme.ca.
alittleaboutme.ca. My website is torontomike.com. You can follow me all over the place at Toronto Mike. Much love to all who made this possible. That is Great Lakes Brewery, Palma Pasta. If you came out to TMLX 15 last week, thank you. That was the best night, and it was a big crowd, and we all had great food and great drink and great cheer. And I got a great kayak, so much love to everyone who came out. The Toronto Maple Leafs baseball team, they're at Christie Pitts on there on Sunday night. And Ridley Funeral Home. See you all tomorrow, where my guest is Midge Year. And you know Midge is just Jim backwards. Did you know that, Jeff?
Never thought about that.
You take the sounds of Jim, because his name is James, and it becomes Midge. And that's why he goes by the name Midge.
How clever.
See you all then.
Struggle explodes, and I play this guitar just the best that I